inspired to push through. Because there's a spark in you. Breakthrough or bust. Hello, welcome back to Breakthrough or Bust. I am so excited to have you here, and I am super excited to have Rebekah here. Rebekah is with Buff Bones, and will you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Buff Bones is?
Hi, sure. So I'm Rebekah Rotstein, and I'm the founder of Buff Bones, which is an exercise system and method for bone and joint health. And it's designed for anybody with osteoporosis or low bone density, but it's also really helpful for anybody. So it especially is useful for just helping you with joint organization, joint alignment, especially if you've ever had any stiffness or pain. And unfortunately, many people just associate osteoporosis with elderly and frail people. And while we have programming that is available for that, our big focus is actually on women in midlife. So like perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal, I'd say late 40s through 60s.
Yeah.
So trying to break that myth and bust it up that it's just older people that have to deal with their bones, and that there's any kind of stigma around it as well.
Absolutely. And, truly taking care of it then prevents it later. It's just, I think oftentimes it's, well, you see the results later, but this is when you've got to start to address it.
And actually, really, the real prevention time is in childhood. So that's like really when you start dealing with it. Or should say, just improving your bones, because it's a lifelong process. You are building up your bone. I think of it like a savings account. You're building up your bone health in childhood, putting away for retirement later so that you can withdraw and not overdraw, right?
Yeah, I love that.
It's really a much earlier thing than we think about. But also just the way that our health system and medical system operates. Unfortunately, we don't work in a preventative manner. So we tend to triage, right? So when something's really a problem, when you're having a hip fracture much later in life, that's when we start to get really scared, instead of seeing how can we avoid that, for 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Absolutely. And then will you speak a little bit to how your program works?
Sure. So, well, there's two parts to our program. So we have a professional arm where we have a certification and training program, and we have instructors all around the world and across the country. And in fact, I'm heading back to my first live training course this summer overseas in London. We haven't done any live courses, obviously, since the pandemic began, everything in a virtual manner. But then we also have offerings directly for the public. So for one thing, all of our instructors then teach classes, but we also have on-demand offerings online. So we're actually just about to launch a brand new subscription site. So it's Buff Bones. It's going to be a Buff Bones on-demand site where you can take any kind of classes. And then we're also launching a 21-day challenge to help you really get into the groove, to understand how to do all of these movements that will then set you up for, if you want to do, say, regular classes, or maybe you want to go to the gym and not hurt yourself, or how do you work around the house and not tweak out your back? So
I love that.
For everything. Yeah.
And then that's one of my favorite things too, because a lot of times we get into this great alignment for our workout, but then the rest of the time we're like, all kind of hunched over. And, gravity is the weight on you all the time. So whatever position and space you're occupying is how gravity is. It's like basically working out all the time with poor posture when you think about it.
It's exactly what you're saying. It's how do you translate all of this just into your regular daily life?
Yeah.
And then also along those lines, we've had for a couple of years a 5-minute a day subscription product. So that was pretty interesting for me to realize how much I could put within 5 minutes, because I curated and choreographed every single thing so that each of these 5 minutes still targets your whole body. So these are the ways that we operate and offer. But then we're also part advocacy as well. So involved with different working groups. So for instance, I'm part of the Ambassador Leadership Council for the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation. I give webinars for AARP. I have another one coming up for Sharsheret, which is a Jewish breast cancer organization. And like I was just part of interestingly, I was just part of a working group a couple of weeks ago for the Society for Women's Health Research for their bone health working group. And we were a handful, I don't know exactly how many, probably 15 or so people. They were all physicians and researchers and very prestigious people. I was the one exercise person, but very great company to be in. And we were putting together proposal for policies that will go forth with a congressional hearing.
Wow.
As well as potential guidelines for physicians, as well as what societies can put out there. So putting forth like recommendations of where we think the bone health world needs to go. So there's a bunch of different arms to the business.
Yeah, amazing. I love it. And, people who know me may already know I love, anything that connects us to our body. Mm-hmm. It's a big part of, honestly, for me, the foundation of a spiritual practice, much less your physical, mental, and emotional practice. Sure. It hits everything. And so it's that thing that we have for this lifetime, and we just have to take good care of it. I used to, for many years, I worked in human services, and I'd work with people who would need an evaluation for continued work, where like their bodies have completely given out. Yeah. And it was like, well, I was just trying to wait for retirement and they didn't make it, or like the person in his 40s who didn't really focus on school, and he just figured I'll do like, trade stuff, and beat his body up so hard he couldn't do the trade stuff anymore, but then he didn't qualify for further education, or so it's like you have got to take care of this body, this thing that you are given. And so I have such a resonation with you and what you're doing.
And what you brought up is also really interesting about this idea of postponing. It reminds me of a client I had years ago who she worked so hard and she did everything until she could retire. And that's when she was going to really start living. And then once she retired, a whole host of health problems came over her. And that time that she had been waiting to actually live for became filled with medical appointments.
Yes.
Navigating the entire healthcare system. So it's true. I think we have to find ways to take care of this vessel that we have, but also it doesn't have to be a sort of thing that we put off. It's kind of why I actually created the 5 minute a day, the Buff Bites program, so that there is no excuse for no time, right?
Well, that's it. Like I think we make things bigger in our heads, like, oh, I have to go to CrossFit for 2 hours. No, you don't. You don't have, it can be worked into your schedule. It can be 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day is better than no minutes a day.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, and it's funny you say that about that lady. It's like, it's like you basically tell your body, right? Because your mind and your body are connected. It's like, nope, you got to stay put together till retirement. And then your body is like, are you retired? Are we good now? Okay, here we go. I'm going to fall apart now. It's like, now I have permission to fall apart.
But I think it's so true. And it's also the experience that people have when they're under a great deal of stress and they just have to get through this time. And then once you made it through the time, your body gives out. Because it's been waiting for that moment.
For you to get out of fight or flight. So it can repair and restore. Absolutely. I love it. Oh, thank you so much for what you do. And let's talk about your challenge, because like so many others, you're impassioned because you had a challenge.
Sure. So I came into this work. There's actually, I was going to tell you the reason I came into this work specifically was because I was diagnosed with osteoporosis when I was 28. So it's very personal for me, but it even goes back further than that. I was a ballet dancer when I was young, and I had gone off to all the company schools, and I was having ongoing issues with my ankles. And eventually, I decided to leave completely because the pain and the frustration had just grown too great. And I ended up going back to school, went to college, and in college, I worked in the sports medicine department as a student athletic trainer, which is basically physical therapy for athletes.
Yeah.
And because I thought, oh, I'll go to PT school because this is what I know, the body and injuries and rehab. And then I decided that I really needed to just completely move away from it. I needed a break, get away from it, never deal with it again.
It's funny you say that. That was originally my major too, and I was volunteering at the hospital, and the people coming down, leave me alone, let me die. And I was like, you know what? I think I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting, we can think that there's something we want and then we switch. And I've worked for 5 years in corporate marketing in New York City, where I'd moved after school. And during that time, though, I went to see one of the big dance medicine specialists there to figure out what was going on with this injury that still wasn't great, but was better since I'd quit. And I started doing these injections, which were very painful. And at the same time, or around the same time, I started doing Pilates, which was not painful and felt really good and gave me this strength and stability that my body hadn't had previously. And so I continued doing that just through physical therapy for my own body. And then I was laid off after 5 years and had just bought an apartment and had a mortgage. And I decided to at least get certified in Pilates on the side until I found another full-time job. And then I decided that I didn't want to go find another full-time job, that this would become it.
Yeah.
So I became a Pilates instructor as a result of all those previous challenges. And then several years in, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis. And that's where I soon after that decided to really specialize within this work. And it wasn't, though, still for probably another 6 years or so that we created the instructor training program and really launched the whole big brand.
Yeah. So what did it mean for you, though, being diagnosed with osteoporosis?
It was very scary, and it was frustrating, and I was very angry. I felt like my body had given out on me the same way it had done, like deja vu from when I was dancing. So I was heartbroken, and I was grieving as well, because it felt like I was having to go through that loss that I'd gone through previously. And specifically, the loss was related to that I was already teaching instructor trainings and teacher training curriculum on special populations, which is like injuries and conditions. How do you address an ACL tear? How do you deal with a frozen shoulder? One of these topics in the curriculum was osteoporosis. So I already knew the basics of what not to do.
Yeah.
And all those what not to do were a lot of the things I loved. So that's what the frustration was.
Yeah.
And yet in the process, so I went through, first of all, a big grieving period. And also, the information, the medical information that was given at the time was actually very poor and what's now considered very inaccurate. I was told to go on medications, and the specific medication that I was told to go on basically stops bone loss. Well, fortunately, I didn't go on it. I did more research, and I found an endocrinologist that was excellent and gave me more guidance, and ran all the labs and tests that needed to be done to see if there was any underlying cause, which is the biggest thing I advocate for anybody who gets a diagnosis of osteopenia, which is bone loss not to the level of osteoporosis, or osteoporosis itself. That the first thing is you need to work with a physician who will do all the blood and urine tests and just identify if there's anything that's just not operating properly that could be causing this.
Get to the root.
get to the root of it,
Yeah.
resolve that rather than throwing another answer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there may be a reason that you should be on medications, but that should not be the very first thing you do,
Yes.
unless, again, you're talking about having fractured, which was not my case at all.
Mm-hmm.
And osteoporosis is asymptomatic. So there's no pain you feel, there's no sensation, you're just losing bone mass and you don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do have pain, that's either maybe you've had a fracture, or maybe it's like osteoarthritis, which is this degeneration of the cartilage, which is not bone loss. So the point is, I didn't take the medication, and I'm glad I didn't. For one thing, I was 28 and the medications had never been tested on premenopausal women. So we don't know what kind of side effects this would have, or on childbearing age, et cetera. And also, as part of what I've been learning more with my colleagues that I had mentioned that are part of the working group, putting forth better guidelines and on when medication should be recommended and such. The thinking now is that nobody of that age should be put on medications unless there's some other cause, or there's something that's going on with unusual fractures, et cetera. Yes. So it was actually very inappropriate for me to have been, for it to have been recommended that I go on these medications. So along those lines, I eventually decided what I needed to do for my course of action. And part of that, with the medical recommendation, was a vitamin D intake.
Yes.
We hear about it all the time now, but this is back in 2004. Nobody was talking about vitamin D in the public sphere.
No.
And it wasn't a very large course of it that I had to be on. In fact, the numbers are much higher of recommendations these days than what I was on. But even the amount I was on, and in changing my diet and increasing my weight-bearing activity, and started working with a trainer, and doing what became the Buff Bones program, all through all of this, I was able to improve my bone density. And so now, looking back, the question is what my scores were, that perhaps they shouldn't have been telling me that it was osteoporosis at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But regardless of whether that's accurate or not, the experience I went through was pretty seismic.
Yeah. And I'm listening to this, and again, it's like the pattern, right? We see this so many times with our breakthroughs, right? These breakdowns happening repeatedly, like, what the heck? Why are you doing this to me, body? And we don't understand why, but it's actually happening for us because it guided you to this place where you're, changing people's lives, honestly. Because when you think about, I don't know, I mean, I want to feel good, into my later years. I don't want to just like one day be stuck sitting home watching TV all day because I can't move, and I'm in a lot of pain, or, whatever. And having mobility and be able to get around and not break things.
Absolutely.
That is
it's
freedom.
Interesting too. There was a handful of years ago, when I used to live in New York City, I lived there for my whole adult life until about 3 years ago. I had attended a really great talk it was part of the broadcast for a PBS series. And so I was able to be in the audience on this. It was about longevity and aging. And it was a physician talking about really the way that our society often has been is going on this sort of slow decline, if you think of a graph, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're just kind of down here for a while. And really what we want to be up here for as long as possible, and then make that decline like really sharp and fast if that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
So like, how can you, again, longevity, how can you extend this agile and mobile and high functioning part of your life for as long as possible? And that's certainly my goal. It's the goal for my mom, and it's the goal that I have for everybody.
A lot of times we program ourselves, right? Our brains take everything in as fact. And if we're just taking, oh, that's just aging. Oh, I got to put up with that. Oh, that's what happens. now you've sent a cue to your body. I mean, people have made themselves ill because they're like, oh, my immune system goes down at a certain age, so now I'm going to start getting sick, right? That's just you programming your body, your mind and your body. And so the more that you could, like, and especially doing something like this, where it's like, I am intentionally, creating longevity and youthful, I'm like doing this for myself. And now you're creating a whole other program. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
And it's reframing essentially what you're saying, reframing the process of aging. And I think people think of aging as, elderly after 70 or 75 technically, but we're aging throughout our whole life. So why aren't we thinking about the changes, and especially in the midlife, the aging that occurs then is we're getting ready or entering or moving forward after menopause. And it's just a natural part, as opposed to, oh, this is the end of what XYZ. What is this now the start of? It's the start of the next phase of life.
Yes.
And the reason I really created the Buff Bones program was for that middle-aged group that was really overlooked, because, you had silver sneakers for the senior crew, right?
Yeah.
And you have, boot camp, high intensity for 20s and 30s. And then you're in midlife and, hopefully, things are great, but, you feel different. Your energy may shift. Your joints may operate a little bit differently. You're more prone to injuries. And it's not that you're more prone to injuries. It's just you've had 20 years as an adult of being able to abuse your body in ways that it was able to sustain. And then things start to slow down a little bit with that ability to recuperate.
Yeah.
So it's not that we have to mourn it. It's that we just have to adjust and identify what are the needs of my body now.
Or celebrate the wisdom of, I really don't need to beat myself up. Like, I could actually do this with pleasure,
Yeah.
And it's funny because one of the guests I had on the show is a menopause coach. And we really talked about that idea of, that devaluing of, especially women after that certain age. It's like our value, everybody loves the maiden. It's like the maiden, the mother, and then, well, the crone, but I argue the matriarch or the wise woman. And so, as a maiden, of course, everybody loves a maiden, but, and then the mother, right? She's bringing up the children. She has all this value. And now she's just an old lady, right? But she used to be the most powerful. She's so wise and intuitive. And so, this is such a powerful time for a woman that I really am strongly committed to women taking back. Right? This is your time, ladies. Like, enjoy it, have fun, like, get those buff bones and make sure that you are enjoying it to every level.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part. I don't think that is a big part of our program, is that self-efficacy side of taking back or retaking charge of your health. That it's always been in your hands, and maybe you let go of it or you didn't identify it as so much, but now's the time to really recognize you have so much control over your body, despite changes that might be happening, that there's still so much that you can do, and helping you restore your body in some ways to the way it operated earlier, with aches and pains that might have started layering on. It's almost like a pot that starts to accumulate some dirt or some residue and such. And sometimes we're just removing some of that residue and essentially rewiring your nervous system so that you undo some of those old habits in movement that weren't serving you. And then in the process of all this rewiring physically, there's certainly a mental rewiring. And changing some of your thoughts and your patterns and your belief systems.
Love it. So did this system that you used, did this come about with you healing yourself?
In part. So part of it is I'd say there's several components to it. Part of it is actually just based on the research that's out there.
Mhm.
So back in 2008, I had to write a paper for a continuing medical education company. And in that paper, they wanted it to be, they wanted me to do an entire literature review of their research. So that was the first time that I looked at all the research that was out there on exercise and bone health. And so part of it is based on the findings there, as well as research findings related to fascia, the connective tissue of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And also related to findings of motor control, which is how your nervous system dictates to your muscles or your muscular system, the timing, the sequencing of which to contract. So a very, very simple example of that is I'm going to pick up my coffee cup. You know that you don't need to use this isn't just a pound thing, right? If I use that amount of force, you'd see all the coffee right behind me. So that's just a simple example, but it basically is making your muscle, I call it making your muscles smart. So it's not just strong muscles, we want smart muscles that are efficient. And so your body becomes much more efficient, less prone to injury, more mobile, and stronger in the ways that you're really trying to achieve. The other part comes from my own experience with my own body and why and when to, I call it reorganize your body. So how we, like the approach and method we start off with, where we release restrictions so that you can prove the gliding, sliding of the tissues in your body, removing the stiffness, and then adding on layer by layer complexity of movement, strength and load, and of course, balance, which is a big part as well.
Yeah.
So I would say it's stuff that feels good on my body. So I'm like the ultimate guinea pig for the things that I put out there.
Yeah.
It feels good. And through all of that became what is the system.
I love it. And, I have a history of teaching group fitness. I was that in between the silver sneakers and the other stuff, because I always liked, doing stuff that felt good in the body. And I never got it. Like, why? I don't understand what about feeling sore and like barely able to lift your cup the next day. What is enjoyable about that? I don't get it. And I tell you what, I was like in the most amazing shape. And I did it all just like feeling good all the time, never sore, strong, like the whole thing. And I felt good all the time. So it's so possible. I don't know why we resist that. I think that's that programming. Everything has to be hard in order for it to work. And that's really not the truth, even when it comes to physical activity.
Well, I think there's also a distinction between something can be hard, but also enjoyable.
There
and I
you
think
go.
That's the big key that a lot of people miss out on, thinking that exercise or movement must be strenuous or painful or arduous.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be going to the gym later today. I do lift heavy weights, and I do believe that people need to lift strong, and I shouldn't say strong, heavy loads. It's not that I believe it. The research has shown this. You need the heavy loads for your bones, but it shouldn't be the only thing you do. So, there's this whole thing about high load and resistance training for your bones. Yes. And you also need to do the foundational programming, because that's not going to improve your balance. It's not going to improve your mobility. You're not working on your coordination there. You're just working on strength, and strength is important, but it's only part of the whole bone health picture.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's like two parts to it. There is the part where, do I enjoy lifting weights? No. Do I feel good after I've done it? Yes. I actually really do feel strong, and I know that I'm helping my bones, but it's not the only thing I do. The other thing is you have to find the part that gives you joy. So for you, it's been moving your body or to music, maybe more dance-like. Great. And that's why I feel like the Buff Bones is the centerpiece for all these other spokes on the wheel of bone health. So great, go to the gym. You're not going to hurt yourself because we've given you the foundation on how to squat, how to lunge. Go to a Nia class, fantastic, enjoy it. Go on the hikes that you love, the walks that you love, do a safe yoga or safe Pilates. Again, both need to be modified for osteoporosis. But if you find an appropriate class, fantastic. Do the
Or
things
even advocate for yourself within the class.
Well, as long as you understand, that's
yes,
the thing.
like if you know, if you
what are
know.
the things to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah.
And ideally, if your instructor doesn't, I'm always happy to talk to them, get them in touch with me, and I can give them some insights, because really every fitness, exercise, movement teacher should be aware of how to work safely with somebody with osteoporosis or just full bone mass.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, this is good stuff. So what is it that you wish you knew or that you did learn? What do you want others to know? Your wisdom nugget.
I wish that I had been less hard on myself
Oh,
in general. So I'm talking just personal now, outside
yeah.
of profession, although
Yeah.
professionally it's the same. Yeah, I wish that I would have realized there's so much time ahead. It's interesting. I just had cousins visiting. They just left today, and one of them is about to enter his senior year. And there is a part of me that looks back, and it's not envy. It's just excitement of like, wow, you have so much time ahead of you. I wish I could have acknowledged that back then, to not feel like I had to figure everything out. And it's useful to kind of remind myself at that now, because I know I'm 46. I will look back when I'm 56, back to now, and think, oh man. So I am trying to work on that now, to enjoy the things and be the person now that I 10, 20 years from now wish I would have been.
Yes. Oh, that is great advice on so many levels. Yeah, I mean, personally and physically, oh, I used to be able to do this. Why can't it's all good. Every day is different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love
Absolutely.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that difference is interesting, especially, I mean, I notice changes in my body now.
Mhm.
I mean, it's interesting. Once I hit 40, things started shifting, and just systems started working differently. And my body doesn't move in the same way it did even a handful of years ago, but there are still things that I can do that are what matter. And doing the things that still feel good to me is really the key. So it doesn't matter that I can't do X, Y, and Z that I used to. Maybe I actually don't need to, it doesn't matter that I can't do the splits anymore, because I don't have a purpose for that in my life. Right. So I think for me, it's also trying to just be really gentle and calm with myself, as I would with a friend, to remind myself it's okay. This feels great. So keep doing this. And what are the things that are feeding me, nourishing me in my body now?
Such good advice. Yeah. Rebekah, how can people find you?
So a couple of ways. The website is BUFF hyphen or dash bones, BONES.com. On Instagram, it is Got Buff Bones. I also have my own Rebekah Rotstein account there. And that is where I do non-bone health related things, but more just movement advocacy. And that is Rebekah Rotstein. And then also on Facebook, the account is Buff Bones, and you'll see a picture of me looking at, I think, a foot, a skeleton of a foot, some random thing that it has.
Well, and I was just sharing with you before we started recording here that I love your Instagram account. There's always these little videos and things here's how to get up from the floor the best way. And like, there's all these tips and great strategies. So yeah, it's such a good place to go and check out.
And thank you. The videos that you're referring to are with my mom, who, this is another interesting thing I think about, just our lifespan and health throughout our lifespan. that, and like one of the blessings that came out of a challenge. So my father passed away from COVID almost 2 years ago now, in the summer. And it was very tragic and it was very, very difficult. But it's also the reason I moved to Denver from New York was so that, and this was 6 months before the pandemic started, I wanted to be closer to them. I'm an only child, and I wanted to be able to, if I ever had to be able to hop on a plane. And unfortunately that happened, but the blessing has been that since then I'm able to see my mom very frequently. And I started doing some videos with her in her recovery from COVID because she'd had it as well, and just helping her get stronger. And I was recording these and sharing them. And those actually, I don't even know if those might actually also be on that page. But regardless, then as she got stronger, we kept doing videos. And then most recently, the ones this year have been the ones you're referring to. And it turns out initially she was very shy. She was a little bit more reticent. And now she just hams it up for the camera. She's the model.
I love it.
She goes like this, in our Instagram reels. It's a riot. And so it's been really beautiful. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And yeah, how fun for mom. And, not only feeling good physically, she's having a good time. I love it. Love it so much. Yeah.
She really is my role model for myself and for the company. She's going to be 76 next month. She's in incredible condition, and she's gone through a lot. She also had fractured her wrist last year when she had fallen from something completely unrelated. And it was so minor that they couldn't even detect a fracture.
Wow.
It was only because I demanded that we get an MRI, because I didn't want to start rehab. You can't rehab somebody if there's actually a fracture. Yeah. But if it's a sprain, I was going to start rehabbing her immediately. And regardless, though, what's amazing is that because she's been doing all of this, and she's been doing the Buff Bones program religiously, and prior to getting sick, she was going to the gym and working with a trainer and such. Because of all this, she knows how to squat. She can easily get up and down, which again, if she couldn't, and you have two wrists that are immobilized, she couldn't have gone to the bathroom without assistance.
Yeah.
So it really was a great wake-up call and a great reminder as well of why, as we get older in life, and actually even in your 50s, that's early postmenopausal is the largest time when you experience wrist fractures.
Wow.
So it's not that one is not more of an elderly fracture, let's say the hip. So, but regardless, just the fact that she was able to still have so much independence was really such a testament to the effort and dedication she's had to taking care of her body.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Rebekah, for being here, for sharing this story. I feel like this is something that a lot of people need to hear. It's so powerful. And just gifting longevity. I
hope so. I mean, that's really the goal. And how can we really appreciate our bodies and use them for what they're designed to do?
Yes. And I love that. Appreciating our bodies, not condemning them, not saying in 5 pounds from now, just as they are right now. Beautiful. Yes. I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here, for listening. Go check out Rebekah and all of her great Instagram posts and the Buff Bones system. And remember to keep pushing through, because there is a spark in you. So much love.
Thank you.